Hello, here we are again with Mookie Tenembaum. We are exploring through these videos his philosophy, his disillusionism, and we are trying to understand at the core of this philosophy his misalgic theory, the theory according to which most, I would say all human behavior has to do with averting suffering. And we are trying to apply these concepts week after week to everyday life, to things that keep happening to us. We are now in late September 2021. We are still amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are at this juncture, I think all of us receiving lots of advice and also giving lots of advice. So we are going to try and focus from a philosophical point of view, of course, on advising, on this very peculiar type of human behavior that has to do with, especially with unsolicited advice, right? So we are going to try and develop a concept of advising.
Well, first of all, here we have an advice. We are advising people how to give advice. So, but it's a good example. Why? Because this is solicited advice. What do you mean solicited advice? For two reasons. People can or not decide to see or not to see and interrupt the video whenever they want. And I would know, and I will never know about it. This is very important. If somebody is giving you advice, it would be rude to tell him, I don't want to listen to your stupid advice. That people normally don't do that. And here they can even say that to the screen, and I will never know. You are stupid. This is a stupid advice, and so forth. And also because the name of the video is how to give advice. So it is really totally voluntary, and people who are willing to watch this video, at least at the beginning, they will not be sleepwalking. And this is very important. Here has to do with every time I give an unsolicited advice, I am not sleepwalking, and now the person I'm giving the advice to is not sleepwalking as well. So you are extracting that person out of the sleepwalk state. That means he or she are vulnerable now to suffering. The whole idea of sleepwalking is that you don't suffer while you sleepwalk. Of course, you don't know you don't suffer because you don't know you're sleepwalking. But the result is that one, and we tend to sleepwalk every time we can. We talk about it in countless videos about it. So when you are asking for advice, you are not sleepwalking, and the person you're asking to is either most cases sleepwalking or not. Yes, but that is when you ask it. Here, the person who is the target of the advice, the advisee, it should be advisee. If there is advisor, there is advisee. Yes? The advisee is at least not there unless you really going to do it. Yes. So you are going to ask to give advice to people, and you are going to wake them up. That means that you should really have something important to say. Because if not, you are really disrupting that person's peace of mind, and bringing them making them aware of something. So it has to be in the misalgic theory, the way we avert and avoid suffering. The way we do it, it is important that we understand that if we are giving advice, that advice should be worthwhile. It should really avoid another suffering, because there is nothing, absolutely nothing that we do that is unrelated to suffering. It's always the result of aversion of suffering. This is Disillusionism 101. So the question here again is, Florencio, why would I do that unless I know that advice is going to help? Well, you have two kinds of advice, Florencio. You have the one that is motivated mostly, I would say, altruistically motivated. That means you want to help somebody, most of the cases, or it's something you want for yourself, and you giving advice in a form of advice, so that person will do something that is in your interest to do that. Yes, and so those two different advices are when we are talking about having an interest in the advice, we may go even further, and it could be, even threat. The advice really, it's a threat. We're not talking about that at all, but we are talking about advice that you have an interest in it. You want the other one to do. Yes, I don't know. You please don't walk there. It's you're standing in the wrong place in the line. Yeah, you should be standing behind you. Yes, in the line. So you're giving them advice, and it could be advice on certain things. You want them to do something, and it is a format. Advice. Advice is a format. It's not just the advice itself. It's a way of presenting things. While when it is when you're doing it for the other person, mostly, but not always, motivated by your moral conscience, but what we call computer number 3. Let me remind everybody, computer number 1 is the body. Computer number 2 is the one that allows you to foresee and who can travel mentally on time traveling using your brain. And the third one, which is the moral conscious, the one that is behind our narrative, and the one that makes us do certain things. And some of those is giving somebody advice so that person will not do something that will harm him, or to have it on record, I told you so. The I told you so advice is a specific kind of advice. Florencio, what is your opinion on all this?
No, I was listening to you and thinking, to make advice worthwhile, it means make it worthwhile to the advisor and to the advisee, as you called it, and also to make it worthwhile at different levels, I think, because there's the practical level on which I might derive an advantage of a material sort for myself, to earn credit, to be respected, to be told how wise I am. And there are the advantages at the very concrete material level for the other. And you just opened a whole different realm, I guess, which is the moral realm. Will I feel guilty? Will I suffer the pangs of consciousness if I don't give advice, even if no one's asking? But if I don't give advice that somehow I feel obliged to give. And on the other side, I think it's also interesting. We've spoken about the resources one has against moral consciousness, against the pranks of consciousness and the pain involved in guilt. And I think also here, advice might play a part, because even when you were saying, I told you so, I could see the other side of this coin. I might regret not having told you so. So I think it's more complicated than just information and communication and material advantages and disadvantages. There is, I don't know how to say it, a moral, at the level of your number 3 computer, there are pros and cons in advices.
Of course, but remember, this advice, the one that we're giving now, is for the advisor, not for the advisee. What to do with an advice? This is an open, really. I don't know if disillusionism can deal with that, because it's going to be very specific. Now, when you're giving advice, it's more in general lines. Let me give you an example of an advice and how it plays out. Let's say I'm driving and somebody is sitting by me and take off their shoes and put their shoes, their feet up, and they put their feet up on the dashboard, yes. And you tell them, listen, take off the feet up, down from the dashboard. I could tell them, I don't like the smell of your feet. I don't like to look at feet. But instead of that, I would tell them, take them off, because if there is an accident, it could be really very, very dangerous having your feet up there. Probably you will get your kneecap on your neck. Yes. So you would tell that person, and look, it could be because you don't want to see their feet. It could be because there are other people in the car and you feel uncomfortable with it. And it could be obviously for the real reason, which I would say it would be most of the cases. But what's the problem with that advice? First of all, the first thing is that there is a suspicion, a bias, a presumption of bias that I'm doing it because I drive. Now I have an authority over the person. Now the advice is a little bit more as an order. So that's the first part you have to take into account when you give that advice. But the problem is that this is what I call a negative advice. A negative advice has not very many chances to be successful, but not also to be wrong. Why? Because once that person takes off his feet from the dashboard, nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen. No.
Nothing will happen. Okay? Or unless I have an accident and that person, oh, thank God that I didn't put it there, and the other way around. Let's say the person leaves the feet up there. Let's say that the advice doesn't come from me as a driver, but a child sitting behind. Okay? Somebody you can really ignore. And you say to the child, listen, I do whatever I want, or who are you to tell me, or daddy knows best, or whatever, or mommy knows best. And they put the feet up and nothing happens. So now, in the first nothing happens, is really you're never going to get. Thank you very much for giving me that advice. It made a whole difference. Life changing. If he or she leaves their feet up, and you get there and there is no accident at all, of course, like 99% of the cases that people put their feet up,
nothing happens.
Nothing happens. You're under the risk of the person telling you, you see, I told you nothing happens. Okay? Which is a stupid thing, because that this is just only one trip. If that person will continue to do it, there will be a better chance. Now, look at what I'm talking. It's a very simple advice on a very simple thing, on something that will happen in the course of the near future. Please go ahead, Florencio. I see that you have...
No, but I'm just thinking as you speak, these are advices oriented to the prevention, I would say, to preventing suffering that in most cases will still never happen. But you had this sort of preemptive advice that there's no way of knowing actually if it was good or ill advice in the end. Going back to moral conscience, I'm sorry, but I'm quite fascinated by it, I think. If I am the one receiving the advice, I can see how I can use this in a preemptive way also. Like receiving advice from you might prevent me from feeling guilty if I follow your advice. It will not be my fault. Let's say everything goes sideways, everything ends up the wrong way. Still, I'm tending to think about it as some sort of insurance, that it was under your advice. It's not really me who is to blame for whatever is happening. I can use what you told me as a form of pardon, as a form of exonerating resource. Don't you think there's a role there also?
Yes and no. Yes, of course. But in most cases, if you want to have what I call the court of appeals for your moral conscience, you will ask for the advice. You see, if you go to a lawyer, the doctor told me, but I will go to them and tell them. Of course, it may happen that the doctor comes, and that in doctor's visit could be even quite common. Yes, the doctor says you are very healthy. So can I continue to eat at McDonald's 3 times a week? And the guy said, yeah, sure. And then my doctor told me. I knew I had somebody in my family who used to come and says, the doctor told me I can smoke. I remember. Now, that was not for number 3. That was for the people like me giving advice. So that was a vaccine. Think about it. That was a vaccine against advice. Because one of the things we have to know about advice is that many times it's not only unsolicited, it's unwarranted. And of course, you may not, not only you are waking them up, you are showing them that they are at least not attentive enough. They're not paying attention to certain things, or they're idiots. I mean, every time you give an advice, you have to understand that you don't know what it feels to be another person. This is disillusionism is misalgia. Misalgia is aversion of suffering, but aversion of suffering is something very personal. You, and everybody suffer on their own. It's your own suffering. But not only, there is a context in which you suffer. Sometimes you suffer more, sometimes you suffer less on the same event. Why? Because you are in a certain situation, or you just woke up with a bad mood, or you had a great night's sleep, So you can advise at that point. What I'm trying to say is, every time you're going to give advice to somebody, things can really go wrong. But then, why to give advice? The answer is, that was your question. I just took your question from. Okay,
no,
I let you say it. Go ahead, say it.
No, but you're right. It sounds so dangerous. There's so many things that can go wrong when you present it this way. That why would we do it?
Well, in fact, it's a fact that many intelligent people, they give a lot of advice. Some of them are in a profession. We're not talking about lawyers and doctors and sons of lawyers and sisters of doctors who give also advice. Yeah? We're talking about, and this is the problem. The problem, you say, I mean, why people give advice? The answer is to score points, or as I said, to solve the problem of guilt, not to have a guilty result. Think about it. You just said it before. I told you so. The I told you so is not only I told you so, Florencio. It's not just I told you so. It is for me to have said it, and for the other one to have received it. This is so advice sometimes it creates make things very clear sometimes between sides. Yes, and also because you can score points. Listen, you give advice to somebody. If I were you, I would buy Microsoft. Yes, and then Microsoft goes up. Wow, very genius. And if you say it twice, you hit it twice. I would buy Google today. Wow. So, but look, there is financial advisors, and they are good or bad or whatever they are. But this is an advice that comes from a person. Again, how close you are to that person, because advice is part of maybe a huge relationship with a lot of transactions, because there are transactions between them. And sometimes it's just somebody who you barely see, or somebody you just meet, or you are bored. Florence, you are standing in line waiting for a bus that's not coming. And you start talking with the person.
And you just pick on an innocent bystander and advise him to do this or that.
Or you just took an Uber and start talking. And advice comes, again, there is a culture that has to do with that too. Yes, there are cultures in which advice is more common to be given unsolicited, and some others that almost do not exist because people don't talk. Yes, so to give advice preferably has to be spoken. No.
I'm still left with the feeling that we are giving more advice than we should. I will take that as an advice out of this conversation. We are almost out of time. I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
I have one to say is that, again, the whole idea here is to make people think how to give advice, when to give advice. And there, no doubt, more advices than should be around there. But to understand also as an advisee why the other one is giving you advice, to give you an insight in how the advisee works. That's what I think it's important to understand in this case. And that's it. Yes, nothing else to say.
We'll carry on next time.
So our advice is
see you. Thank you.
See you next week. Bye.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.